Hello.
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 Hi.
Hi.
Good afternoon from Ghana, and good evening or good morning wherever you are joining us from. I am Samuel Aglotin, and I'm going to be your moderator for this session, the first session of the two sessions. At this time, I would like to invite Professor Joseph Tay, the director of the Center for Migration Studies of the University of Ghana, to give us a brief welcome address.
Thank you so much for the invitation, distinguished speakers, guests, researchers, students, ladies and gentlemen. We want to thank you all for accepting our invitation to participate in this West and Central Africa webinar, which is jointly organized by UNHCR, GAIN, and the Center for Migration Studies to commemorate the 70th anniversary of the founding of UNHCR. I would like to invite the Provost of the College of Humanities, within which the Center for Migration Studies is seated, to give you a special welcome address since you are all special. Professor Dan Ofori, please can you give us a welcome address?
Thank you very much, Professor Tay. I like the part about reminding us all that your conference participants are all special people. So I'd like to welcome all the special participants to this conference. I'd like to, on behalf of the University of Ghana and of the college and the host center, to welcome you all to this West and Central Africa Regional Conference being held on the theme 70 years of protecting people forced to flee. Given the recent deterioration in the forced displacement situation in the West and Central Africa sub-region, this webinar is indeed very timely and could not have come at a better time. I would like to commend the Center for Migration Studies, the UNHCR, and Global Academic Interdisciplinary Network, again for short, for jointly putting together such a stimulating conference package. The University of Ghana, and by extension, the College of Humanities, like many other institutions of higher learning, takes a very keen interest in events such as this one, which provide a platform for researchers, policymakers, and development practitioners to discuss development challenges, either recurring ones or emerging ones. It is my belief that this conference will specifically provide such an avenue for the intensification of lesson drawing, knowledge sharing, and purposive interactions among researchers, refugee protection officers of humanitarian organizations, state organizations, social partners, and other stakeholders. I'm also convinced that the recommendations of the various speakers, participants, will signpost innovative ways of strengthening mechanisms for the protection of forcibly displaced persons. On this note, I wish you fruitful deliberations and an enjoyable webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Dan Ofori, for that brief and insightful welcome. And that I would like to make some few remarks on this session titled Refugee Protection in West and Central Africa, Legal and Policy Frameworks, Solutions and Challenges. We have assembled people from the academia, activists, and practitioners to give us some insights on this title, Refugee Protection in West and Central Africa, from the legal and policy frameworks, solutions and challenges perspectives. I would like to make some few remarks regarding the Q&A session. And you can all see the Q&A tab below, just at the bottom of our page. And we can put in our questions there as we go on. And at the time, appropriate time, that question will be thrown to the panel members to respond to appropriately. And I would like to, this time, want to provide a brief overview of this session. The session will start with a brief introduction of the panel members, and then each panel member will be given between 4 and 5 minutes to give us a brief presentation to set the tone for our discussion. And then after that, general questions, and their discussion will be based on specific questions that are posed on them. So after the questions are posed to the panel members, they will respond with their presentation, which should last up to 5 minutes. Then after that, there is about 4 or 5 general questions that will be asked, and any panel member can respond to it. But in very rare cases, we'll be directing the questions to maybe people we think has the necessary background to respond to such questions. Then we will move to the Q&A session, where the questions that are posted there will be directed to the panel member to respond to. So, by way of introduction, we have Professor Joseph Teh, who is the director of the Center for Migration Studies, as one of the speakers. And Professor Teh is a geographer who has interest in issues of migration, natural resource governance, environmental change and migration, and forced displacement specifically. He is a co-director of the South-South project of the UK Research and Innovation Platform that is titled South-South Migration, Inequality and Development. And Professor Teh's research is sponsored by a number of international organizations, including the IOM, the ACP Observatory on Migration, the ILO, and a lot of other funding agencies, including the EU. He would be speaking to us or giving us a brief overview of the forced migration landscape in West and Central Africa. And that will take us about some 5 minutes. Then after that, Dr. Veronica Bruyère, who is an activist and advocate and a born and bred Liberian war survivor, will give us some insights into some of the issues regarding protection of refugees, and she will be dealing specifically on the perspective, her perspectives and experiences as far as refugee protection in West and Central Africa is concerned. Then the next speaker would be our next speaker will be Mr. Andrew. Our next speaker will be Titus Mordecai. Titus is the head of Refugee Status Determination branch of the National Commission for Refugees, Migrants, and Internally Displaced Persons in Nigeria. And he will be talking briefly on the programs and activities and how they deal with forcibly displaced people within their domain in Nigeria. And lastly, we have Mr. Andrew Grimberg, who is the Senior Durable Solutions Officer of the UNHCR in Ghana. And he will also be telling us some few things about their work at the UNHCR in Ghana. So I will invite Professor Joseph Teh to take the floor.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk about the forced displacement situation in the West and Central region, Africa region. So the forced displacement situation in the South region has worsened in the last decade, If you can see the graph over there, you see refugees numbers in 2012, which is in the green or the blue, and then the red are 2019. You see the figures are higher. It increased from about 528,000 to more than 1 million. Asylum seekers has also increased. Internally displaced persons has also increased tremendously. That one alone has increased by more than almost 4,000%, whereas refugees have increased by 120%. Stateless persons have also increased. And this increase is due to a lot of conflict situations, armed conflicts. So whereas in the 1990s and early 2000s, civil wars in Liberia and Sierra Leone accounted for a lot of the forced displacements. Now we are seeing more of armed group attacks. So we have in the Sahel region what we call the Sahara Crisis, where violent extremist activities that started in Mali in 2012 expanded to Burkina Faso and Niger. And that has caused the displacement of a lot of people. Then we also have the Boko Haram situation, insurgency, and the counter-insurgency by the security forces that have also caused displacement in Nigeria, Cameroon, Niger, and Chad. And then the Central African Republic also, we have large-scale displacements that are linked to political conflicts over there. People believe that some of these things are also influenced by poverty and environmental change. So we'll not only be talking about the conflict, they are also influenced by poverty and environmental change, especially in the Sahel. So if you look at the source countries where we are having most of these things, the source countries of refugees and asylum as of 2019, you see Central African Republic being on the top, followed by Nigeria, Mali, and some of these other countries. But on the right-hand side, you also see the host countries. And it's interesting to see that some of the source countries are themselves also host countries. Cameroon is an example. It's also hosting a lot of refugees. And that is as a result of the Boko Haram, for instance. So people are being displaced between Nigeria and Cameroon. Nigeria is another example. It's sending out forced migrants or forced displaced persons, and it's at the same time also receiving a lot. So just to be careful that all the countries produce some form of forced displaced persons, and they also receive. The response to forced displacement in the region is very interesting. We have traditionally applied the Refugee Convention 1951 and then other international instruments. In recent years, the Global Compact on Refugees is also being used. At the regional level, we have the EU frameworks, for instance, EU Refugee Framework. Then the ECOWAS has also come out with a number of frameworks that have been used. And as a result of this, refugee research practices have moderately improved in the region. You could see that if you look at it in terms of a proportion of refugees that are hosted in camps, it has declined averagely from about 60% to about 20% in the region. So you could see those ones are in the red, 2018, as against the blue in 2010. And you see they are all declining, except a few countries like Liberia and Niger, where more people have been sent to camps. So in line with GCR outlines or regulation that we should try to shift from keeping refugees in camps to hosting them in communities. Some of the countries have reduced the proportion in camps. Also, refugee status determination processes have improved slightly, but it still takes a long period of time to process these things. Some programs have been implemented in the education sector to include refugees into national education system. The enrollment figures are still quite low for refugees because many refugees are not able to get the money to take care of the auxiliary costs. Even if the education is free, they still need transportation costs, they still need to buy material, which is difficult for them. And then refugees have also been included in national health systems through the national health insurances, and that has only improved the access moderately. Sometimes they are still required to buy some medicine. That is for the general population, and that is sometimes difficult to do. Economic inclusion programs have also been implemented in some parts of the sub-region. So they have given them some skills, and then also governments are trying to help them to work, but then still some of them have to still apply for work permit, and that is very difficult for a number of them to get. And so also in the South region, a lot of people are unemployed. So unemployment rates are very high, and that makes it difficult for refugees to get jobs. The record of durable solutions have been very interesting. The dominant durable solution has been voluntary repatriation, followed by local integration. And you can see over there in the graph that voluntary repatriation has increased slightly and declined between 2012 to 2016, increased again and came down. And many of the people that were repatriated went to Nigeria, Cote d'Ivoire, Central African Republic, Liberia, and Sierra Leone. That is within the decade. The repatriation is also affected by lack of resources, also political instability. People don't want to go back to places where they will still experience conflict. And then the refugees also tend to prefer third country resettlement in developed countries rather than going back to their own home. So that is a problem. Third country resettlement is one of the things that refugees want a lot, but that one too has declined tremendously. If you look at the figures compared with what we experienced the last decade. So you see the graph there, it goes up and down. But if you consider for the whole decade since 2010, and you compare it with 2000 to 2010, the figures have declined as a result of low quotas given by the receiving countries. They don't want to receive a lot because there are a lot of emergencies. Then the COVID-19 has also affected this a lot. And so when it comes to third countries, resettlement, that has been affected seriously. Then local integration, which is final one I will talk about, is something that most refugees don't seem to like, but that seems to be the only one that is available. And so there have been local integration programs. So in general, the response has improved slightly, but not too much. Many refugees still face a lot of problems. Resource constraints, insecurity, and COVID-19 are some of the problems that have affected the response to refugee situation in the region. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Ted, for that elaborate presentation. We'll digest it after all the speakers have taken their turn. I would call on Mr. Ginsberg to tell us about the programs and activities that the UNHCR has been implementing to deal with forced displacement in the region of focus, that's West and Central Africa. Take the floor, Mr. Ginsberg.
Okay, can you see me? And can you hear me? I think I'm broadcasting. So let me go ahead and tell you that, first of all, unfortunately, or fortunate, it depends how you see it, I'm the Senior Durable Solutions Officer in Ghana, and I don't have a regional responsibility. So I can only talk to you about my understanding of the operation in Ghana and my experiences elsewhere where I was. I was in Kenya previously. And I just should tell you that my comments haven't been reviewed by UNHCR. So I don't know if I'm speaking, really not speaking on behalf of UNHCR. This is not a prepared statement. I need to tell you that I also recently arrived in Ghana last year in July, and I'm still learning. So I will convey my thoughts, but I'm here to learn as well. You have obviously studied this issue thoroughly, and I'm prepared to learn something as well from the panelists and the participants as well. So let me just say that Ghana has close to 14,000 refugees and asylum seekers, and about 1,500 of them are asylum seekers. Ghana's very generous in terms of rights to refugees. They have a freedom of movement, and there's no encampment policy. So refugees can live where they choose to live. This is not the case in many countries, particularly, and of note, Kenya. Kenya has 4 refugee camps. They have 2 in the western region, Krisen and Ampane. They have 1 in the central region, Ijekram, and they have 1 in the Bana region called Fatenta. And Accra has a large number of refugees, 3,500. Refugees also live in other cities and towns, about 500 of them. And there's also a fair number of Togolese refugees who've been in the country for a very long time, living in the Volta region. So the population was pretty stable until about October 2020. Due to election situation in Ivory Coast, we received about 900 new arrivals. During this emergency, UNHCR helped the government with the new arrivals. We helped set up a reception quarantine center in line with COVID protocols. We supported the government to build this center. We supported financially with wet feeding, non-food items, which we call core relief items, shelter materials, water and sanitation like toilets and washing facilities, COVID items, and the team members also helped the government with registration, although that's not always the case. Two camps, Ampain and Fatenta, were expanded this year to accommodate some of the new arrivals, and UNHCR supported mostly financially, but also, with advice, clearing the land, planning the sites, with tents, with water and sanitation. UNHCR also intends to provide some financial support for the new arrivals, which we do through CBI, cash-based incentives, mobile money, for a limited period in order that the new arrivals can get their feet on the ground. UNHCR supports the Ghana Refugee Board. The Ghana Refugee Board is a governmental entity charged by statute with the management of refugees. They manage the refugee situation in Ghana. They liaise with other government agencies to support refugees to access rights. They work with the immigration, they work with the health service, they work with social welfare. They register refugees, they conduct refugee status determination assessments, and they bring the cases to a board, which is actually an interministerial board called the Ghana Refugee Board. So they divide this, they say, okay, this part is the secretariat, that part does the the assessments, and the board does the decisions. So UNHCR in Ghana helps with training and capacity building. We have recently done some training and capacity building with border officials on refugee law. I personally participated. We monitor the border. We do some RSD training as well to capacitate officers. We promote and support studies on refugee law and law review. With respect to security, we support police and other security, agencies to ensure security in the camps. Sometimes we do this by by building posts. UNHCR provides money to GRB, and GRB contracts to build police posts, sometimes accommodations in and around the camp to ensure that there's adequate security for the camps. We also support the refugees to do some neighborhood watch programs. For livelihoods, we help the refugees to try to be self-sufficient. We help, financially, again, through the GRB, building marketplaces in and around the camps. We fund income generation activities. It's targeted. We give business grants for some business proposals and plans. We support with vocational training, apprenticeships, scholarships for a limited number of apprenticeships. We also follow up sometimes, with startup costs to get those who have been trained into business. We support with specific income generating activities in and around the camps. The big one is crop farming. It could be with supporting to rent land in order for the refugees to plant and to farm there. It could also be with tools. We help with poultry farming in some places, rabbit projects, grass cutter projects, piggeries projects. But the ideal is to get them into, integrated into the country. To the extent possible, we want to bring them into government projects. There's a very, important project in Ghana, one district, one factory. For example, there's a tomato factory being constructed in Fatenta. we can try, or we want to try to get them involved in the value chain. Can they grow tomatoes that could be bought by the factories? We also want to get them involved with we will promote private employers to employ refugees. So there's some discussion with some private companies as well. With respect to education, primary and secondary education are technically free. The history for UNHCR is in the camps, the schools were constructed and previously run by UNHCR implementing partners. Now the government runs the schools, and the schools are integrated. They have both nationals and refugees in the school. So the schools have been handed over. UNHCR supports this through construction of some new schools, kindergartens, expansions of the classrooms, support with repairs to the schools, other items like libraries, computer resource centers, classroom materials, computers, tablets, furniture. To some extent, we support some students, not necessarily with the fees themselves, but with the uniforms, travel, occasionally dorm fees if they go to a boarding school. For tertiary education, we administer DAFI, which is a scholarship for some high-scoring refugees that may get scholarships to go to university. With respect to the camps, the refugees or the asylum seekers generally start in tents, but we try to make the camps more like a village, livable. We support by construction of permanent shelters. Refugees actually receive money. They have to have a plan. And they're given the money in increments. So this is currently being monitored by UNHCR.
Okay, yep. If you can wrap up for us.
Okay, I'll try to just say two more things with health. The government is in charge of the hospitals that were previously UNHCR, but UNHCR supports with support for insurance, NHIS. Yes, that's about it for now.
Okay, over. Thank you very much, Mr. Ginsberg. And I want to inform the panel members that I'll be prompting you via the chat platform. So once a while, check there to see whether we are on time. Thank you very much for that insightful presentation. And I want to state also that our system is programmed directly in English, but there is that opportunity to convert it to French if you are comfortable with French. So please, just to let you know. I will call on the third speaker, Dr. Veronica Finbrouille, to speak on her perspectives and experience on refugee protection.
Can you ask Echo to please put my slide up? I sent him a message. I don't know whether they're checking their messages.
Can our technical person share the slides of Dr. Finbrouille?
Thank you. And if you can please help me to pass it along as I go on.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ablotti and Professor Ted, for giving me the opportunity to share my personal experience as a Liberian war survivor who lived as an internally displaced person and as a refugee. It's an opportunity to be able to share part of my experience for 4 to 5 minutes. So hopefully I'll be able to say something meaningful within that time. Next slide, please. So it's 4 to 5 minutes. I just try to put some information down for you. Hopefully during the discussion time, some of these issues can be unraveled and unpeeled, but they're complex issues, and I'm hoping within this short frame of time, I'll be able to tell you at least the source and the origin of my perspective and my experience, what I know as the roots of displacement, the impact and the consequences it has caused, and what I think is the future and comprehensive response, and of course to share my gratitude and say thank you. Next slide, please. For me, I speak on this issue as someone with a lived experience and a perspective, and I'm so glad that Professor Tai already gave a really brilliant overview. So definitely for me, poverty and neglect, I experienced that, and I think that ushered me and a lot of other people from the continent into this forced displacement and violence issue. I was internally displaced for 3 years of my life, multiple times during the war in Liberia. I was also a refugee in Ghana for 9 years of my life. I immigrated to Canada as a single immigrant on a so-called Safe Third Country Resettlement program, but through educational program. And during those years that I survived the war, I also survived violence and abuse. But then these experiences definitely give me an opportunity to access a world-class education and unlimited opportunity that I have today. Next slide, please. For me, what I think the roots of displacement is, specifically regarding Western and Central Africa, is poor governance that is still buried deeply within the vestiges of colonialism and nationalism. Somebody came and divided our continent and told us we are Ghanaians, we are Liberians, we are Central Africans, and so we we woefully and honestly hold on to those boundaries and try to prevent other people from entering or going out. And I think there has been an ad hoc protection scheme that is characterized by the North-South divide. You can tell a very stark difference between who is protected and where they come from when you look at the global map of refugee or UNHCR protection scheme. Violence, conflict, and strife, like Professor Tai already highlighted, is a major source of all the displacement that we are noticing across the continent, and specifically in Central and Western Africa. Human rights issues, civil and political abuse is also very rampant. And most recently, harsh environmental conditions are becoming more of a forefront means to describe the situation of displaced people. And economic hardship and human suffering, of course, we all know about the trek between Western and Central Africa or Eastern Africa towards Libya or North Africa, and entering Europe through the deadly voyages. Next slide, please. The impact and the consequences I think forced migration cause on a lot of people, including myself, is the long-term psychological trauma that is untreated. We go for many, many years without anybody dealing with the issues that they went through during the war. The protracted situation is grim. West Africa and Central Africa has people that have been refugees and internally displaced for the past 30 to 40 years, and that is a serious problem. There is a long-term deflection of upward vertical mobility, and Professor Tai already highlighted on that. People lack employment. Their daily livelihood is always stringent and very difficult for them to navigate. So people just remain in a cyclical position of, whatever UNHCR or aid organization can give me, I will have it, but they just remain in that state. The apathy and despair and desperation that results, it's what honestly lead people to these perils of journey that it take, doing irregular and mixed migration. And sometimes they're trafficked, and sometimes they're vulnerable to all kinds of abuses, especially girls and women. And of course, imminently, it leads to a more dangerous situation for migrants and displaced people specifically, and cause their death. Next slide, please. So based on what I've told you and my years of over 25 years of work in this topic, on this area, and of course living as a refugee for more than 75% of my life, this is what I think it should be the future, or a comprehensive response. There is no doubt, we all know it. Everybody says it, that the UNHCR 1951 convention is way overdue for reformation. We need to get to that. We need to reform it. We need to come up with a more contemporary document or framework that will speak to the situation that is happening or emerging on the ground. In the OAU, or the African Union Refugee Convention as well, it lacks political will, even though it is so revolutionary in terms of, in comparison to the 1951 convention. It just doesn't have the teeth for it to be implemented. I'm almost done. I'm left with 2 points. Okay. I'm almost done. Yeah. And domestication of the Kampala Convention 2012 is not enough. You know, we have to go beyond that. And we are also aware that the ECOWAS common approach on migration is very hopeful, but there are a lot of challenges to be dealt with. And lastly, for me, I think the complementary pathways must be prioritized for girls' education in all host countries, not just for third country resettlement program. So on that note, my last slide is thank you.
Thank you very much, Veronica. I will call on Titus to just tell us about how Nigeria is employing international and regional frameworks to design and implement programs for protecting forcibly displaced persons. And as brief as possible, just about 4 minutes.
Good afternoon, all. I would have loved to share a slide, but for time factor, I'm going to be brief to state. Other speakers have spoken, and I just want to say that I'm towing the same line with them. We have the legal and institutional framework, such as the Act that established National Commission for Refugees, and we have 1999 Kampala Convention, the Global Compact for Refugee Policy. Nigeria also established a Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management, and Social Development in 2019. The Northeast Development Commission that was established in 2019. The Niger Delta Development Commission and Federal Ministry for Niger Delta, National Emergency Management Agency. These are all legal and institutional framework Nigeria has on ground to ensure that refugees and internally displaced persons are protected. Nigeria also grant refugee status to refugees from various countries of the world. Currently, Nigeria holds over 61,000 Cameroonian refugees as at a result of data information of November 2020. And the recession is still ongoing in Nigeria, as the crisis in Cameroon is far from being resolved. We issue identity cards as attestation letters to refugees. We issue machine-readable convention travel document to refugees who are entitled to it. We also operate a non-encampment policy in Nigeria. And we also have this host community initiative where we are encouraging local integration, where refugees and asylum seekers live among host community to at least go about their business and transaction, just like ordinary citizens in the country. In terms of durable solution strategy, Nigeria in 2019 signed a tripartite agreement with UNHCR, Cameroon, and the federal government of Nigeria for voluntary repatriation of Nigerian refugees that are living in Cameroon. In 2019, that operation started. Some refugees were voluntarily returned to Nigeria, and the process is still going on. And this year, it has been intensified. The federal government has insisted that our refugees in Nigeria and Chad Republic must return home. And we are about to, we have started the process of voluntary repatriation agreement with these other two countries. And by the first half of 2021, I want to assure that operation on voluntary repatriation of Nigerian refugees will be a very great history in Nigeria. I want to also talk about durable solution for IDPs in Nigeria. The federal government, through the agency National Commission for Refugees, is building 100 units of 2-bedroom bungalow and states in 4 states of the Federation to resettle IDPs in Nigeria. This is a pilot state, and it will be replicated in other states. We also want to tell you about, I have also mentioned about the host community initiative. All right, I'm wrapping up. We also have to do, we are into enrollment for refugee national health insurance scheme of refugees and IDPs. We are also into self-reliance project for refugee and IDPs, where loan is being granted from government to from the Central Bank of Nigeria to assist refugee and IDP to become self-reliant in Nigeria. For time factor, I think I will stay here because I've also shared my document to you. Maybe if there are other questions, I can answer.
Questions too.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, panel members, for your contributions. I have some few general questions here that I would like you to respond to. And I want one of you to respond to just one question. If a question is posted, I want only one person to respond. So any person among you could do that. My first question is, do you think that the existing international, regional, and national policy frameworks, for example, the refugee conventions, comprehensive refugee response frameworks, the GCR and ECOWAS frameworks, are adequate in protecting forcibly displaced persons? I want one person to respond to that so we can have some small time for the Q&A. Who will do that for me?
Well, with my background in law, I think it's adequate and it's appropriate for me to respond to that question.
Okay.
I mean, I already alluded to it. Can you hear me? Let me put my camera on.
I can hear you. I'm sure others can too.
Sorry, just a second. So I've already alluded to that briefly in my presentation when I mentioned the fact that the UNHCR 1951 Refugee Convention is in dire need of reform. I mean, it's over 20, 30 years that Professor James Hathaway has been propounding reformation of the UNHCR 1951 Convention. It just doesn't, I mean, after 70 years, it just doesn't speak to what is happening, especially on the African continent. And I applaud the OAU for coming up with the 1969 OAU Convention as well, which is very meaningful and very useful. I really personally love the language that is used in that. It is revolutionary indeed. But at the same time, maybe if UNHCR cannot reform the 1951 Refugee Convention, then they should definitely be assisting the African Union, because it's always been the issue with the African Union of implementation, to assist them, to help them implement some of the magnificent provisions and articles that they provide in the 1969 OAU Convention. One last point, of course, I need to highlight that because I think ECOWAS is doing a great job and they need to be recognized for the progress that they're making. But it's important that nationals and states within the Central and West African region get away from, maybe, let me just use the word decolonize a little bit. We need to really, as leaders, as advocates, and as people who have gone through this experience and now, you know, taking leadership role, we all need to come together and work on how we can decolonize our states, decolonize our minds individually, and get away with this border and nationalism that is also, facilitating the increase and the hiking of the number of displacement that we are seeing within the region. I rest my case.
Thank you very much, Dr. Finbrewe. I'm directing my second question to Mr. Ginsberg because it has to do with durable solutions. How can we make the less preferred durable solutions, for example, voluntary repatriation and local integration, attractive to refugees in order to reduce the current pressure on third country resettlement? If Mr. Ginsberg can react to this for me quickly.
Okay. I hope you can hear me. I don't know. Okay. I'd like an opportunity to respond to Dr. Finn's statements, but to be fair, I'll talk about voluntary repatriation. In order to make voluntary repatriation more workable, you need to work on safety and dignity. So safety is the situation in the countries of origin where these people come from. Is it safe? The rule of law has to be in place. It has to actually, be reasonable for them to go back. Facts, not theory. The refugees have to be convinced this is voluntary on their part. So we encourage them to go and visit their communities, and simply having the countries come and tell them, or having, how shall I say it, a desire for them to return is not enough. So maybe what we need to do is we need to invest in the countries so there is safety. Also dignity. What is the economic situation if they go back? Can they really survive? Are the basic services there? The cash grant has to be reasonable. I mean, we've all seen pictures of certain parts of Syria where there's not one building that, is actually, intact. How can we send people back to a situation where that's the reality? It's not feasible. As far as local integration, refugees need access to the economy. They need the ability to get jobs. They need the ability to open businesses. They need access to banks, to financial services. Further, with respect to their legal status, they need a durable status if they're going to opt for local integration. Something akin, citizenship is not, the rule. It doesn't have to be citizenship. It can be permanent residence. They need identification that translates into their ability to access services directly, and not necessarily going to, let's say, the organization like GRB to write a letter on their behalf so they can access services. So that's what I think with respect to those durable solutions. Over. Let me know when I can respond to the first questions too as well.
I will definitely give you about 30 seconds to do that when I wrap up this very segment. Any of you can respond to the following question. What are the protection challenges in the West and Central African sub-region? What are the key challenges? I want us to pinpoint some of the key challenges that we can identify in refugee protection as far as West and Central Africa is concerned.
All right. I can, okay.
Sorry. Insecurity. From Nigerian perspective, you are aware of this ISWAP and Boko Haram insurgent activities that has kept the country boiling, and the neighboring country, Cameroon, Nigeria, and Chad. This is a very big challenge to refugee protection in the Central and West Africa region. Thank you, please.
Okay, Professor Tay, I would like you to also react to that question briefly.
Okay, so I will add resource constraints. So many of the countries in the region are very poor. They are already struggling to look after their own people. And so sometimes they find it difficult to get the resources. So when you are talking about unemployment, you are talking about education, it means governments in the region will have to pump in more. But sometimes they are not able to do that for even the citizens. So that is another problem or challenge. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we are in a new normal with the COVID-19 increasing day by day. How can this affect our protection of forcibly displaced persons? Okay, please, you are on the floor.
Yeah, so for the sake of time, I can quickly assess that also, as I was looking at that for UNHCR recently in the paper.
Okay.
So one of the problems is the access to territory. So when borders are closed, for instance, refugees that have to move into a country to seek asylum, they find that difficult. So the UNHCR in the region has sometimes have to governments in the region to just allow refugees in when borders are closed. It also affects the RSD application processing, because then it means in some countries people are not working and there are a lot of applications for asylum to be processed. Then it also affects the very resources of the country. Government has many resources to manage COVID in their own country, and then so they are not able to have enough resources for the refugees. Then the health issues of the refugees is a problem. They are in camps and we are talking about social distancing, and this is very difficult. They may not also have access to health facilities, COVID testing and other things. So these are all some of the challenges posed by COVID-19. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Ginsberg, I want to give you 30 seconds to respond to the first speaker's question, Dr. Bruyer's question. Mr. Ginsberg, are you there?
Yeah, I'm there. What I wanted to do is I wanted to make sure that I muted when I wasn't speaking. But I think that it's important, and I don't know whether I can say this in 30 seconds. But I started in UNHCR in a different period. I started in 2002, and at that time, when I was starting in UNHCR in 2002, I worked in a camp called Dadaab. It was in the eastern part of Kenya. And at that point, the camps were run essentially completely by UNHCR. The model was completely different. UNHCR, the head of the sub-office was essentially like the mayor of the town. Everything went through UNHCR. The hospital was an implementing partner. The schools were an implementing partner. Water and sanitation were completed by UNHCR. But I think that what my colleague didn't talk about, and what we need to talk about, is the impact of the GCR on that paradigm, on that model, which has been significant and has been significant here in particular in Ghana. So I don't want to take more time. I know I have 30 seconds, but happy to answer questions if that comes up. Over.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to bring us some few questions from the audience. And the first question goes specifically to Veronica. Some Ben Chalabla want to know, what do you mean by deflection of upward or vertical mobility? If you can throw a bit of light on that for him.
Okay. Yes, I know some of the terms used are very complex terms, and it's hard to it's very frustrating to do this kind of really important presentation in 5 minutes. Anyways, but what I mean is, in simple terms, is Professor Te has done a lot of work in Ghana on that. Is refugee livelihood and sustainability. Upward mobility means that you are able to get into a gainful employment, an employment that recognize your ability, your skills, your intellect, everything that you bring to that job. So you're not underpaid. You're actually valid for the position that you have based on your education, and you're able to move upward. Deflection means that refugee comes with so much, to contribute to their host countries and their local community. They ignore, they're not recognized, they're never included in some of the decision making, and that what it does to them, it quashes their self-esteem, put them into despair and apathy and bring them down, so they're deflated, they decline, and they never go up. Of course, it's not everybody going through this situation, because of course some of us went through it and we're able to come up, but I'm talking about in a systematic way that can impact a lot more people than few tokens like myself coming out and giving this example. So in a nutshell is to be able to, the global compact on refugees that Mr. Ginsberg is talking about, yes, it does have some really good aspects to it that has been helping so far refugees to get, surmount and get over that still state of staying on a refugee camp and getting into a cycle, so that they're able to get a good job, they're able to get some education, they can take care of their family, they're able to go back home, they can even move out of the camp. But now the situation is just really protracted and very long. So
thank you very much. Thank you very much. Mr. Ginsberg, Mr. Andrews Ginsberg.
Yeah.
Delali want to know how the UNHCR access land in Ghana for your agri projects. How do you have access to land in Ghana for your agri projects?
Generally we work through the Ghana Refugee Board. So if we have a situation like we needed to expand the camps, it is the Ghana Refugee Board who negotiates with the municipal, the local authorities, and also the landowners. However, for certain projects, we may have an implementing partner that can talk with landowners about it, like a field for farming, etc. So there's both ways, I suppose.
Okay. There are some questions here that I think are a bit general, but I would like to take the last question. Emmanuel Kwashi from IOM South Africa Regional Office. We know COVID-19 has made most countries employ protectionist umbrella-like policies due to the health and the socioeconomic impact. Given the above, how will ECOWAS sustainably manage post-COVID regional migration and its repercussion on migration governance to ensure refugee protection and reduction in the root causes of refugee crisis? This is a really long question. Can any member of the panel briefly give me an answer as the final question?
Yes, I can do that.
Prof. Briefly.
Yeah, so the ECOWAS is already working with other countries in the region, so it's supposed to mobilize the countries. It has already gotten in place some frameworks that are supposed to work. And what ECOWAS will then do after the post-COVID is to ensure that we get, for instance, mechanisms to ensure that borders are, for instance, open. As I said, COVID that has affected access to territories by some ECOWAS member countries. Also, ECOWAS, we have to look for resources. It's not enough to say individual countries alone. So if, for instance, Ghana is hosting refugees, Ghana has to do a lot. That will not work. So ECOWAS as a country, we have to look for resources with the international development partners so that ECOWAS implements programs directly in those countries rather than leaving the lot of the responsibility to governments that do not have the resources to do so. So that is one of the things that can also be done. And then finally, there should also be guidelines in how to bring back economies that are suffering as a result of COVID-19. So these are some of the things that we can briefly see.
Thank you very much. And on this note, I want to thank you all on behalf of the organizing committee for your time, and to the speakers. We are grateful for your explanatory talks and the prompt answers you provided for some of the questions that were asked in this session. I would like to remind all that a second session is coming up soon. And if you haven't registered yet, please do so immediately. And the recording for this session would be posted to us. And in April, there would be a report that will be published. So let's be looking up to that. Some people have asked that question in the chat platform. So, and I want to use this opportunity once again to thank our numerous participants around the world for their time. It's been nice interacting with you all. And we'll see you again in the next session. That comes in a few minutes' time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bonjour, Monsieur Emmanuel. Vous m'écoutez, s'il vous plaît?